A woman in Houston is going after a textbook publisher in Texas for whitewashing history, especially when it comes to the issue of slavery. Now, her 15-year-old son actually took a picture of part of the textbook that made it seem as though slavery didn't even exist in the United States, and that's what got Roni Dean-Burren really upset. Now, her son, Coby, had sent her a photo of a colorful page in his 9th grade McGraw-Hill World Geography textbook in a section titled Patterns of Immigration. A speech bubble pointing to a U.S. map read the following: the Atlantic slave trade between the 1500s and 1800s brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States to work on agricultural plantations. Of course, it makes it seem as though they willingly immigrated to the United States to work for pay, but we all know that that's not what happened.
So now, look, you might say, hey, look, the word slave is in there. It says the Atlantic slave trade, right? But then it talks about workers coming here and migrating here. Well, okay. But remember, we're all adults, right? And so we grew up knowing what slavery is. They're teaching this to kids, the 9th graders. So if this is all you saw, and of course not all they see, but if this was all you saw, you might think like, oh, I guess the slave trade was about workers coming to work here on farms. That's not what the slave trade was about, right? They came by force, they were killed, and it said, I hope that the textbook shows greater context than that. But remember, the Texas textbooks are a matter of great controversy, and in the past they've done things like de-emphasize Thomas Jefferson. Why? Because he wasn't as religious as the conservatives in America today want the Founding Fathers to be. But that's facts, that's history, and in fact, he's the guy who was pretty critical in writing the Declaration of Independence and being enormously influential, obviously, in the Constitution. And they're like, it's kind of inconvenient, so let's kind of start to write Thomas Jefferson out of history.
Yes, I have more examples. This is an ongoing story because the school board in Texas wanted to change the standards of the history books, right? And so what they wanted, and this isn't the publishers themselves, these are the members of the Texas school board. They wanted to de-emphasize people like Thurgood Marshall, who was the first black Supreme Court justice, and focus more on conservative leaders, right? So those who would fight against abortion and things like that. And so if you're looking at this one portion of the textbook and you're thinking, it's not the biggest deal in the world, make no mistake, this is just one example of many examples where these textbooks do whitewash history. And that's not okay, because what are we supposed to do with history? We're supposed to learn from our mistakes. I know that doesn't often happen, but giving people the wrong information or teaching kids the wrong information doesn't help anyone. All right, so
can I just say quick about two things about that? One, also in the same textbooks, they said, you know how Joe McCarthy had done this communist witch hunt, that the communists infiltrated every part of the U.S. government, and he was embarrassed at the end because he couldn't prove any of it because it wasn't really true. In this version of the textbook, it was true, and it says, just as a fact, communists had infiltrated the U.S. government back then. I mean, so the context matters. So within the context of these insane right-wing books, it doesn't appear to be an accident when all of a sudden slavery turns into, hey, people migrating here to work on our farms.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, this story does have somewhat of a happy ending. Now, Roni Dean-Burren did make a Facebook video about this that went viral. Over 500,000 people watched it, and that actually led to the publisher claiming that they're going to right their wrong. They're going to change the digital version of the book, and then when they reprint the next batch of books, they'll make the correction. But here's the problem with that. It could take 10 years for them to reprint the next batch of books. So all those books that are out there right now aren't going to be recalled, and I think that's an issue. But nonetheless, I want you to take a quick look at what Roni Dean-Burren had to say. I think she made a powerful video. Let's take a look.
The book is this book by McGraw-Hill. Then on the inside of the book, which is a little scary to me, you have all of these people who are seemingly wise people. All of them have that little PhD behind their name. Patterns of immigration. You see, it says one of the defining attributes of the United States is that it is largely a country of immigrants and their descendants. About 13% of the people in the United States are foreign-born, while Native Americans, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians make up 2% of the population. The remaining population is descended from immigrants. Immigrants. Yeah, that word matters. Immigrants. The Atlantic slave trade between the 1500s and the 1800s brought millions of workers from Africa to the southern United States to work on agricultural plantations. So it is now considered immigration.
Yeah, not exactly voluntary immigration in that case. By the way, Roni Dean-Burren was an English teacher for 11 years at Pearland, Texas, this same high school that her son now attends. She's now a doctoral candidate at the University of Houston's Language Arts program. And obviously she realizes that words matter. And so she wants to make sure that everybody gets the right education. So the very end of the story, her son says, "Hey, Mom, can I get your phone?" Or says, "Pick up your phone," and calls her, even though they're in the same room. And she's like, "What are you calling me for?" And he says, "Mom, you told me to call you when I realized I could change the world." I love that. I love that. See, she cares about education. She was an educator. And so she knows the value of doing education right. That's what she passed on to her son. And he exhibited that by being the first to recognize this, point it out, and eventually lead to a correction.